Today we're speaking to Cody Oldham, and would you like to give a brief introduction of yourself?
Of course, yeah, I'm a 18, almost 19-year-old professional wildlife landscape artist. I live in Colorado in the USA. I've been painting since I was roughly 12 to 13. In the beginning, I painted dinosaurs and stuff like any little kid would. And then I kind of quickly developed an interest in painting wildlife, landscapes. I started working with the New Zealand artist Andrew Tischler for quite a few years. And then in 2021, I started mentoring with a local artist, Dustin Van Wetchel, who does these more grand wildlife scenes. I would kind of say the side of nature that people don't usually get to see, the more grand side, and I'm really drawn to that. So he's had a big impact on me over the past couple of years in terms of like subject matter, how to paint, uh, quality of materials, composition, all those things. I have a home studio here, and I am represented by two galleries right now, one here in Colorado and one in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Great. You're doing great for an 18-year-old, I must say. So, you mentioned that you're identifying as a professional artist, right? I
Mm.
think you're familiar with this stereotype of an starving artist, right? So,
Mhm.
my question is, how did you find the courage to start this endeavor, which can be considered somewhat risky?
Well, I think, when I started it, when you're like a little kid, you don't really think about it. You just kind of think when you start painting and doing all this stuff, you just think, oh, this is fun. And you don't really think like, how am I going to make money at this when you're 12?
Yeah.
And I kind of come from a creative background. My dad is a craftsman, so I got lots of encouragement from him to kind of pursue my craft. I'd be in his studio when I was really little, just kind of painting, doing stuff in his studio. And, I think right around when I was 12 or 13, that's kind of when I just started doing it. And I saw that a lot of these other artists and like these big time artists, like you could say millionaire artists who have been at it for, 40 years and
Hmm.
have been like wildly successful at it. And I thought like, well, if they can do it, I'm going to try to do it too. And I think when I was like 12 or 13, that never really crossed my mind. But, when I was like 14, 15, that's kind of when I started to think like, okay, this is going to be my profession. How am I going to make this work? And
Hmm.
I never really like looked at anything else to say like, well, maybe I want to be this or that. Or maybe art isn't for me. Like, I never really had that cross my mind or anything. Like, being in the creative arts really just came naturally to me, and kind of going into it as a profession. I'd say it never was really a big choice for me. I just started doing it, and then I would see like, oh, you can make money at this. Here's some steps to kind of help with like making income at it in the beginning. And I kind of just went at it without really any, like, I'd say fear of like, what if this doesn't work? Because I kind of have the philosophy of like, if something doesn't work, well, I just learned something there. Now I'm going to go at it again differently. Um, and, I think the term professional sometimes is a little, like sometimes people think it means like you know everything.
Hmm.
Um, and I've gotten that before where it's like if like people think if you're a professional, you must know everything. And a professional just it means that, you show up every single day. You work hard at your craft day after day, pushing to get better. And, a lot of artists, I'd say including myself, has like resistance whenever you go in to a project. You have like, something that's pulling you away from the easel, and you sitting there and just getting through maybe that 15 minutes of like, or 20 minutes or however long it is of like real downtime. Once you push through that, that's kind of like, I don't know if you've read some of Stephen Pressfield's books, but he talks about like resistance and like how that's kind of what keeps a lot of people from doing what they're really meant to do in the like creative arts or whatever it is. So, I just kind of started seeing these opportunities and I just started doing them. And I never really kind of second guessed myself or thinking maybe I shouldn't be doing this or what if it doesn't work. And just working hard every day at what I do and what I love, opportunities start to present themselves. And especially when you start sharing like what you're doing to the world and just you put it out there, you don't really care what other people think. And I think being fearless about it, that's what like makes people like they want to support you because they see that what you're doing, you're confident in what you're doing, and they want to help you. So I'd say in the beginning, when I first started selling, that was kind of like these people, my clients saw that I was a young artist and I was pretty committed to what I was doing, so they wanted to help. So that's kind of like, when I started selling my work locally, a lot of the people who went to these little shows, they would see that like, oh, there's this 13-year-old artist, and it looks pretty like he looks pretty professional. So they started buying my work. That kind of gave me more confidence to say I can make this work. So that's a small bit of what kind of pushed me to pursue it as a profession. But also it's just the fact that I really love doing it and there's really nothing else I want to do. And seeing certain big name artists like Clyde Aspenvig or Scott Christensen, or Robert Bateman, these artists who have been around forever, like they started their career kind of exploded in like the 80s and they have been like doing that since. And that's a big inspiration for me, seeing what people like that have done to kind of like, you could say, prove that starving artist stereotype kind of wrong. Because
Hmm.
I'd say that was kind of a stereotype during that time, the 80s, 90s. That was like, if you're going to be an artist, you're not going to do well, kind of a thing. And in today's day and age, it's like you could see what Tischler is doing. That it's like you can become a full-time artist, and it's not just selling your original paintings and that's it. And a lot of these bigger artists that kind of what got them started, but they've kind of evolved and adapted and are doing other things with their work now. And I'm looking at like, okay, you can make videos, you can make prints, you can do all these different things. You can do videos with that painting, and like it's kind of endless with what you can do with it. So I'm seeing all these opportunities now, and it's kind of endless with what you can do in the creative arts. I'd say it's very different now than it was, 30, 40 years ago. So yeah, kind of going into it as a full-time artist, it was never really any big decision. I just kind of started doing it, seeing the possibilities in it, and I really enjoyed doing it, and I knew that I could be really successful in it. So I just decided to go all in on it kind of in the beginning, and I have never really looked back.
I like how you mentioned about the topic of resistance. I think at first I also experienced that a lot because if it comes to making paintings or sharing your work, that's
Mhm.
all new and it's scary.
Oh
And
yeah,
it feels like it will stay as scary as it is at the first forever. As a typical example that most people can relate to, for example, if you start working out,
sure.
your muscles are sore and it feels horrible the next day. You don't
Oh
feel
yeah.
great, and it feels like you ask yourself, how are these people doing it every day? But the thing is, it actually gets easier because
Mhm.
you, as you said, you're doing this every day. Me, myself, maybe I'm not painting every day, but I'm in this pursuit of art every day. And after a good amount of days, you start gaining this level of momentum. I'm not saying that it's all that easy, but it's
Sure.
definitely easier
Well, I
compared
would say,
to the very beginning.
yeah, and definitely in the beginning when you're starting out, it's like I'd say in the moment when you're starting, you don't really realize. I say it's resistance because I like the way Stephen Pressfield worded it in his books,
Hmm.
but it's kind of like this thing that, this kind of force that tries to get you distracted from your real life's work with what you actually want to do.
Yeah.
Know deep down what you want to do, but then you keep getting distracted with these other things. Well, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. And when you're starting out, I think resistance kind of hits you all the time, and you're like, well, I'm not feeling inspired today, so I'm not going to paint.
Hmm.
And looking back, that happened a lot. And I say in the moment, I didn't really know it. I just thought, I'm not inspired, so I'm not going to paint. And then it was more like I kind of trained myself to like, no matter how I feel, I'm just going to show up. And I just kind of like train my mind to, no matter what I'm thinking about that day or how I feel, I just go into the studio and start working because I know what I have to do that day.
Yeah.
So I have goals set to like, okay, I got to finish this whole section of the painting today. And maybe that sounds daunting, but once I get in the studio, get the music rolling, kind of get in the zone,
Hmm.
then everything kind of flows naturally. But I think like for beginners, kind of because I think it's pretty common for beginner artists to like say, I'm not feeling inspired right now, so I'm not going to paint.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, like I think like like Stephen Pressfield calls it the muse, like, and that's what it is. Like instead of waiting for inspiration to hit, then you work. Like once you start working, the inspiration will find you. Um, so the muse has to find you working, and that's when those things start happening. Like you have kind of like those light bulb moments. So, so to any of your listeners, I would say that Stephen Pressfield's books are, I'd say, the best reads for artists. So there's War of Art. Um, I think it's The Artist's Journey, Do the Work, um, Turning Pro. Look all those books up. Those are like, I'd say, I've never read any other book that like communicates so well to how artists function, how they
Hmm.
think, and how to kind of dominate resistance and do your life's work.
Yeah. I will check these books out. So
Definitely, yeah.
thankfully, yeah. I feel like if it comes to any other profession or any other pursuits, it's
Mhm.
kind of expected from you to do the work, especially or even if you don't feel like working. But if it comes to art, there is this. It also depends on the level of inspiration. For example, if your task is to do your school homework, it's not a valid argument that I'm not inspired to do it. It sounds kind
Mhm.
of silly, right? But if you say that you don't feel inspired to do art, it's like people can get it, or yeah, if you know what I mean.
I think so. Yeah, like, since when you say inspiration hits, like it can be like you could go a week or 2 weeks and not feel inspired to do something. And then I'd say like Pressfield talks about that, like that's kind of the mindset of the amateur artist that they kind
Mm-hmm.
of wait around like that to happen. And the mindset of the pro is you sit down and do the work. And it like you get to the end of the day, you don't care if it came out good, bad. All that matters is that you sat down and kind of beat resistance. You sat there and you did the work. And that kind of like way of looking at it, that philosophy, it's really inspiring to me. So I've kind of incorporated that into my own work ethic.
Yeah, I think many artists can benefit from that, since I always see artists who are telling me, or like people who are reaching out to me on social media, how can you get inspired, and asking questions like that. And it's yet so simple but powerful answer. You just start
Yeah, I mean,
doing that.
having trying to get yourself inspired before you work is a good idea. Like, say, you just want to watch a couple videos on
Oh yeah.
painting or look at other paintings to get ideas of what you could do with whatever you're painting that day. I think that's always good. I do that almost every day. I say like, okay, I'm going to do this snow-capped peak. How would this artist paint that? Because I want to see how they would apply the paint and
Hmm.
what colors they might use. So getting kind of filling your brain with ideas with how you're going to approach the day, and that will kind of lead to you'll kind of get inspired that way too. So I think doing is like you can kind of put yourself in the mindset of getting inspired. But even if you're not inspired, I think it's still a good idea to just sit down and do it anyway. And then, you could maybe not feel great when you first start out doing it, but then an hour later, you could be totally into it and loving what you're
Yeah.
doing.
And also, at least for me, and also I think for many other artists, a great level of inspiration comes from seeing your progress, and that comes from doing the work. You see,
Definitely.
like
Yeah.
you also mentioned that you were doing art already as a little kid. I would assume even before preschool or like,
Well, I've my whole life I've been homeschooled, so
oh,
I've been like, we do that. I did that on the side, but I do it, super early in the morning, so I'd be able to get to work in the studio at like, 7:30 or 8 a.m.
mm-hmm,
Uh, and then, I would go and I still go usually till like 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon.
mm-hmm.
I know artists like who can paint and like start at 6 a.m. and paint until 9 p.m. And
Oh no.
I really admire artists who can do that. Maybe I'll get there one day. But as for right now, it's like that sounds pretty impressive. But for me, it's like, I can't do that because if I try to create anything past that, chances are I'm gonna look at it the next day and be like, okay, that sucks. Scrape it.
Yeah.
Um, so, I think it's also easy for younger artists, kind of beginner artists, to compare themselves to, the like pros who have been doing it for 30 years and say, oh, I'm not as good as them. How am I going to even do this? And I see that as kind of a common theme for artists or people who are just starting out. And I think it is easy to compare, like if you're painting a certain thing in a painting, but then you look at this artist and say, it doesn't look at all like that. Um, I'd say I see that a lot. And sometimes I've even experienced that. But I think comparing is kind of the worst thing because then you're just kind of, I say you're almost trying to find an excuse to not do that
Mm,
when you say like, well, I'll never be as good as them. So you end up not doing it. But that's kind of like that's resistance, say kind of like in the back of your head. And I think looking at other artists and getting ideas for what you're going to do, but then just focus on doing you. Focus on like, okay, I have some ideas here. How would I do this? And even right now, I'm still trying to figure out like, what is uniquely me and what is like my unique style? What's my unique way of approaching this scene? And, I think you look at a lot of other artists and you could see that they have a signature style.
mm-hmm.
And but that artist doesn't really think they do. They because they think, and you can kind of see that over the years how their style kind of evolves. So
Yeah.
you see that artist as having a very unique style, but then that artist, or kind of such as myself, you look at like if you have a style, but you don't really see yourself as having a style because a lot of times you kind of still see yourself as the student. So, you want to be professional in what you do and you want to go kind of all in with confidence, but you also kind of want to remain humble and also be open to new ideas with how to approach things. Um, so I hope that makes sense.
I feel like many artists have this idea that they have to have some really specific style and stick to it for their whole life. I had this really young artist reaching out to me. I think he's like 15 years old, and he told me that he hasn't found his style yet. And
Uh, well,
it's like, it's,
yeah,
I,
it's like when it comes to a personal style, it's like, I'm like, I look like why I should start developing my personal style, but it's like I probably won't have a signature style for like another 20 years.
yeah,
So it's like, if you're like when I was 15 and I look back at the work I did when I was 15, it's like, well, that's not great, but that was what I could do with it. That's the best I could do at the time.
yeah,
So
sure.
you're of course always striving to get better. Um, like when it like having my own personal style, it's like I might probably won't like I might be 30 or 40 by the time, I have a style that people can recognize as uniquely me.
Mm-hmm.
So for right now, I'm just kind of trying all kinds of different things. I'm saying like what new brushes would like how would this new brush work in this piece or certain comp like how I would put together a composition or kind of anything like that. So I'm not right now I'm not set in one way. I'm saying, well, I could try this, I could try that. And I did a piece, one of the first pieces, I think it was the first painting of this year, was a Colorado fall scene. And that piece I just decided to experiment. I was like, okay, I'm going to use a lot of different brushes here. And I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to apply it very differently. I'm going to keep the paint kind of thin in some places, build it up in some other areas. That piece was really fun. And after that, I'm like, with this big piece, I think I kind of want to keep the paint a bit thicker, use some bigger brushes. So every time, like, you could say artists who have been doing it forever, they kind of have a system and kind of like no matter how they feel, no matter what they're doing, they can consistently create very good work. But even for me, it's like I look at paint, like every single painting is kind of a mystery where it's like, okay, I could get into this, have a great time, and it could go perfect. Or I could get through the block and discover there half the painting isn't working and I got to start over.
Oh yeah.
So right now, I don't have a like set system to make every piece a bit like predictable. So like, okay, this piece is gonna every single piece I'm gonna do is gonna come out great. Right now, it's just like experimenting. Maybe this piece will work, maybe it's not. I'll just go in there and see what happens. Like this behind me, I this is gonna be a wolf pack of wolves, and actually got about like 30% of the way through the painting last week, and I found it wasn't working. So I had to went back into Photoshop, redesign the whole thing, went
Mm-hmm.
over it with some white. I'm starting over, and I'd say that's kind of daunting for some people. Like you get into a project, it's like, how could you stop? Don't stop. And for me, it's like kind of natural. It kind of came naturally, where it's like if something just isn't working, like you don't want it to leave the studio thinking, I could have done so much better. Like I'm always trying to make it so like whatever I'm painting it to the best of my abilities. So I knew that piece wasn't going to work. So I'm like, well, I just lost a week, but I'd rather it come out to the best I can do.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think I'm a little like self-critical of my work at times. So it's like I'm constantly looking at it saying, maybe that won't work. Maybe I got to start over here. And I do that a lot. Um, I feel like I kind of went on a rant here. I hope I didn't go too far from the
Oh
original
no no
topic.
no. Keep going.
Um, so uh, starting over is like the best thing you can do with a project if it isn't working. And some people may consider it like, oh, you're giving up on it, and you're actually doing the opposite. Like, if anything, you are just completely improving the whole situation and making the whole painting more interesting. So I have to do this time and time again. So like sometimes I'll do a full painting, I'll get the design ready, and I'll do the painting start to finish, and I decide, this painting, I don't think I want to put it in the gallery. So I'll either
Mm-hmm.
paint over it or just say, okay, I'll just hang on to it, not do anything with it. But, the first painting I did this year, that I finished this year, I really enjoyed. I didn't have that many pitfalls with it. And I really enjoyed it. And then I have this piece, which is kind of a struggle, but I'm trying to have fun with the process as well, seeing kind of the new possibilities that'll come up along the way. Because like I can't predict saying like, okay, this piece I got to have done by this time, and it's going to look this way. For artists who have been doing it forever, I think that's a little easier because they have a system for how they approach each element within the painting, so they can produce good work consistently. And like I said, for me, it's like I still kind of see I treat like I approach what I do as a professional, but I'm still also the student because there's a lot of this whole thing I don't know yet. And I don't have a set system to like every painting is going to be a massive success. And I like accept that saying this could work or it couldn't, but might as well just start and see what happens. And the goal, of course, is for it to come out to be a successful painting. And you have little pitfalls along the way, and you try to solve the problem and keep working at it until the problem is solved.
I like your long-term view of doing arts in a way that you let yourselves to be experimental until the age, who knows, maybe 40 or even longer. So you just don't settle down on a certain style and stick to it for the entire life because, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we're quite young and probably we have a lot more to learn still. So
Definitely. Yeah.
so it would be a shame to stick to one certain style forever. Maybe in the future we'll do that more because I think you also have seen my development of paintings for
Oh
the
yeah.
past
Like
few
just
years.
I would
Yeah.
say just the past like 2 to 3 years, it's looked radically different. I'd say at this age, like you start developing really fast. Like 3 years ago seems like an eternity, and you look back what you did 3 years ago, and it's like, wow, that sucked. But once you start getting like once you if you've been painting for 30 years, you can still sell a painting that you did 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Right now, if anything is older than 6 months, it's not leaving the studio. So, as you get older, the I'd say when you're young, progress happens very quickly. But once you start getting older and you've been doing it for a while, I'd say you start to kind of find a way of doing things that works for you.
Yeah.
You're not saying this is how I do it and this is how I'm going to do it for the rest of my life. You just have a rough way of doing it. Like, yeah, I know how to paint a rock that looks pretty good, but I know in 5 years from now, I'm gonna look back at that rock and think, wow, that does not look good. And then right now, so like I said, right now, development is fast, and you look at pieces you did 6 months or a year ago, and you don't think. But if you're an artist that has been painting for 40 years, a painting from 10 years ago to the present doesn't look that much different. So I'd say as you get older, that time frame from like how much you progress slows down a little bit because you've learned certain things and you've picked up on a lot of stuff and that's stuck with you. So that's kind of what you incorporate into your painting process. But when you're young, you're just absorbing everything like a sponge and thinking, okay, I'll try this, I'll try that, I'll try that, which is why every single painting can look radically different because you're just soaking up all this information from all these different artists. And which is why every like 6 months, it looks like a completely different artist did it. But right now, like I can look at a piece I did in like 2021 and say, yeah, I think I did a pretty good job of that. But in 2021, if I look back at a piece I did in like 2019,
Oh yeah.
it's hard not to win. Like it's like, oh wow, that I didn't do a very good job there. So when you start out, yeah, progress happens pretty fast, I think, and at least that's been my experience. But as you get older, you start kind of having a system of doing things. You start creating consistently good work, and then you can still be proud of a piece you did 5 or 10 years ago.
Also, as you mentioned that being younger you can take in more information. Also, being older you can do the same thing, but people don't today do that more being younger, right? But I
Mm.
think it's a really important thing to do that because that gives you a better sense of confidence for the future if you have already chosen a certain road or a certain style to continue with, and you can know for sure that it's the right path
Mhm.
for you.
Oh yeah, like I say like these artists who are kind of set in their ways right now with how they do things, and you could recognize it immediately as that artist. But it's like I'm sure like Mark Majori or Scott Christensen or Clyde Aspavig, artists who have been doing it forever, they are still like trying to learn just as much as they did when they started. Like they're not said, okay, this is where I am. I'm like
I'm
now. So
perfect. I'm done.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're constantly like, sure, they've been painting for, 30 years or whatever, but they're starting to think, how can I improve what I'm doing? I'm going to look at this other artist and see how they're going to do it. Like, I think the mindset from when you kind of start out, kind of soaking everything up to like when you are like, when you have been doing it forever and you're very successful at it, your mindset of learning is still the same. You're still trying to learn from as many people as you can. And at that point, you're like, there's artists who are at the same level you are, but you still want to learn from them, and maybe they want to learn from you. So the mindset of learning, I think, doesn't really change from like when you're 18 to when you're 50 or 60. It's like you're still trying to learn and soak up as much information as you can and apply it to your process. So like yeah, like Mark Majori, like I look at the work he did in like 2014 to now, I can see a difference. Um, so that's always like I'd say learning happens a little faster when you're young, but when you get older, like you start to kind of slow down and really think about how you're going to approach the painting with these techniques. And sometimes, like when you're young, you want it to all happen fast. You want to like, okay, I need this, I want this. And that's just
Yeah.
part of like you're not the most like when you're young, patience is not really on your side. I'd say a lot of the time for young people, including myself. But as you get older, you start becoming more patient with the process. And like, 5 or 10 years, you think, maybe I'll kind of get to know this in 10 years from now. And that's the like, as a full-time professional who's been doing it forever, that's like no big deal. But when you're young, you're like, 10 years, I want it now. And so when you're young, you can kind of, I'd say, get a little impatient and you want to be good right now, but just being patient and just don't try not to compare too much to other artists who have been doing it for like 40 years and you're like I'm 18 and I know that like well I've only been painting for this amount of time. I still got a lot to learn, but I'm still going to approach what I do seriously. Like I'm a professional. Like I said, being a professional, you show up every day and you do it. I think that's what makes a professional. And you slowly start to see the progress. Maybe you don't see it immediately, but sometimes I call them leap paintings that I do, where it's like a painting where it's like I might paint this way, and then I'll do a painting that gets me up to here. And right now that usually happens once a year. I'll have a once, maybe twice a year, I'll have a leap painting that
Do
kind of
you
gets
do
me
it?
up to the next step.
Sorry, do you do it intentionally or it just kind of happens?
It kind of just happens. Like, I'll just start a piece and get into it and finish it, and it kind of just turns into that. Like it just happened naturally. It wasn't planned. It just happened. And I think that's kind of like, you know, like I was talking about with the muse, where it's like, if you're really into what you're doing and you kind of like when you're enjoying something, like if you get into the process of painting it and you have like a 9 hour day, you enjoyed every one of those hours, I'd say the chances of a painting like that happening are much greater than kind of just like, okay, I guess I'll do that. Then usually paintings you can kind of see that come through. So whenever you're enjoying the process, and like, maybe when you get into it, you're not super excited, but once you start getting the ball rolling, then you start to see like the possibilities opening up. It's like, oh, I know how I can approach this. This is going to be fun. So, you can see people can see that in your work if you enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it. But like whenever I put together a design I'm super excited about, and then I'll block it in. I'd say after like the excitement really comes when I first start, because it's like you can do a whole block in of the painting in like a day. And that's when you can kind of see like how it's going to look as a believable piece and not really a cut and paste Photoshop design. Because I don't really know what it is, but like when you have a design, it looks kind of choppy, doesn't look great. But as soon as you put it on canvas and start painting it, it all kind of flows and looks like a believable scene. So that's really exciting for me. And sometimes leap paintings can be a massive project you've been working on for 2 months, or it could be a painting that's small that took you a week.
Mm.
Um, and these aren't intentional. They kind of happen, and you look at what you did with that painting, and you think, okay, I'm going to apply those techniques to the next project I do. And then, you kind of start working, perfecting those techniques, and then you hit another leap painting. So, I kind of like what I just did this year. I'd say I kind of did a leap painting this year. Um, and I'm going to incorporate what I learned with that piece into this piece, just in terms of like, kind of everything across the board, design, how I mix the color, kind of my mindset through the process, etc. So, yeah, I uh, lost my train of thought.
Um,
I hate it when that happens. I just completely lose my train of thought. Um, but yeah, some of this stuff you can edit.
and
So yeah, with leap paintings, they kind of come out of the blue. Like you don't see them coming, and when they do come, it's kind of like a pleasant surprise. And then you just incorporate what you learned there. Kind of remember, okay, I really like the way I painted that. That's different. How did I do it then? So I can incorporate it into my future work. And like I said, that kind of things like that happen once or twice a year. But it's not very predictable. Like maybe I'll have
mm,
three in a year, and maybe I'll in the next year I may just have one piece that I did really well. So yeah, it's very unpredictable, but you kind of show up every day at the easel with the intention of making this piece like the best painting you've ever done.
oh yeah.
So that's kind of like your mindset, your goal. That's what you want this piece to be. And maybe it will, maybe it won't. But you don't really think you try not to have the thought of like, well, what if it doesn't? Like you try to look at the positive side of things and saying, well, what if it does? Um, so that's kind of how I go about whenever I approach a project, especially a big project like big, like this is a 36 by 48, and I put together like a really cool design. It's like, okay, I'm super excited about this. Because it's like I spent 2 days on this design. I'm happy with it. I really look forward to getting into it. And with every painting, you're gonna have some points where it's like, okay, I'm really not enjoying this. And sometimes it's like you gotta like just work a little those areas that you don't want to work on.
Mm-hmm.
Just work. Try not to put all your focus towards it. It's like, okay, I'll just work a little bit in that area, but then I'll go to this area I really want to work on. And don't try to put like sometimes pushing it too far, like if something just isn't working. And sometimes you just gotta like not do it. If you keep going at it over and over and it doesn't work, well, I think at that point you just have to move on to a different idea. And I've done that before where it's like I keep pushing an idea and I want to make it work. But then it gets to a point where it's like, okay, this isn't going to work. So I'm going to put together a different idea that hopefully will work.
I really like your conception of this conception. Wait,
The concept of,
the concept of a lip painting. I never thought of it as this way, but I had a really similar experience when I transitioned from working from home to an art studio. It was a huge jump because previously I was working with on paper. It wasn't really, you know,
Mhm.
I'd I didn't have enough space for canvases at my home, or I don't know. It just felt uncomfortable to use an easel, right? So I got the chance to use an art studio, and then I started working with easels and canvases, and the environment change was also a big factor, which caused a huge growth, because yeah, it was just a couple. Yeah, it was probably one painting, and that's where my style changed completely. I even categorized my paintings into two. One is called season one, and the other is season two, because the change was so drastic. So
Mhm. Yeah, I
also,
mean, I think it like once you've been doing it for a little while, you can kind of say, okay, I know in 10 years my paintings will look something like this. Like what I'm doing now, I kind of have a vision for, how I want the piece to look.
Hmm.
And I know in like 5 or 10 years, I have a rough idea of where I will be. Um, and I'd say, like your painting style, I'd say your style is very unique. And that's just going to be developed over the years. And it's like in maybe 5 or 10 years, it'll be still like you'll be able to distinguish that as your style, but it will be very different from what you did years ago. You can still see some of the influences or some of the techniques coming through in your new work, but it's also it's different. It's kind of like different but the same.
Hmm.
Um, and like right now, like from when I was painting 3 years ago, I paint nothing like I did 3 years ago. There's not really much I'm doing now that like picks up from what I did 3 years ago. I mean, maybe there's a couple things, but most of all, I kind of have a new way of doing things now. I think that's just because when you are working with a mentor, which I think really helps. I think any aspiring artist should work one-on-one with another artist who's been doing it for a while. And after working with Van Wetchel for a while, I kind of saw because I always wanted to have a more painterly quality to my work, and I never really knew how to do that. So I always did like the super tight realism.
Hmm.
And then then I saw what he was doing, which is kind of like a painterly realism. So you look up close and you could see like he just took that palette knife and drug it across the textured surface. And that was it. Then it looks like leaves. Years ago, I would paint every one of those little leaves. And now it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
okay, that looks fun, taking the palette knife and dragging it across the textured surface. And I like that effect better. So
Yeah.
sometimes stuff like that can make me uncomfortable because it's like, okay, one brush stroke. This has got to look good in one brush stroke. Um, and then if you're thinking too much about it, then the chances of it maybe not working the first time, uh, it may not end up working. But if you have confidence about it and you're not thinking too hard about every little thing you're doing within the process, I think it comes out better. So if I was thinking about every single brushstroke I'm making, I'd drive myself crazy. So which is why it's like I'll play music, I'll sing along to the music, or like, and I'm kind of getting involved in that too. And I'm also just I'm looking at the reference and I'm painting, and like subconsciously, I know exactly what needs to be done. But my mind, like I'm also thinking about other things as well while I'm painting. So, thinking about what you're doing too much can end up like it can look too perfect or you try too hard if
Yeah.
you know what you have to do, but then you're kind of thinking about other things. Um, I think, when you have more freer, more expressive brushstrokes, it kind of shows that you weren't trying too hard. And I'm trying to make it so my work doesn't have a stiff quality because whenever something looks stiff, it ends up like you could tell that like, okay, he was trying too hard with this. So I try to do something, I try to, make a brush stroke or something look effortless, and then it communicates a lot. So I feel like I'm kind of deviating from the original question.
No, I can totally relate to your tight realism because that's also where I got started from. But
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, for me it was rather pointillism, but also really stiff. I was just yeah, it was the thing that I wanted my paintings to turn out great. Of course, who wouldn't want that? But I wasn't confident enough to use loose brushstrokes, as you mentioned. So it rather turned out really stiff. But I mean, we aren't born with confidence as artists, so this
Oh yeah,
ability
it's
to
it's something that
have
needs to be developed.
yeah, so these confident brushstrokes come a little later. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's also
Definitely.
something a direction where I'm trying to strive towards.
Yeah.
I'm trying to have clean outlines, but also having bold brushstrokes. It's a
Mhm.
weird combination of both. To have them both, that's my would
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying there.
yeah. So it's like it looks confident, but it doesn't look messy. Like
Hmm.
having
Yeah.
this perfect balance is something I would like to strive towards. Also, did you go to any art schools?
I have not gone to any art school or school in general. You could say like I'm kind you. Some people would call it self-taught, but like I said, you're learning from so many other people along the way, and you're seeing what they're doing. So it's like it could be categorized as self-taught, but you're learning from, dozens of other artists. So self-taught in a way that no, I didn't go to any art school or anything like that, just because it's like a lot of art schools they kind of have a set way of doing things, and this is how you do it. And for me, it was like, well, what if I want to experiment with this? What if I want to try that? So I never really felt the need to go to an art school because I felt that, with kind of the whole online world of art, you can go to YouTube and learn kind of how to paint anything.
Yeah,
And you can, refer to dozens of other videos, articles, looking at other paintings. And I think, when you're starting out as an artist, when you're first starting out, I think art school is a good idea just because it's like kind of gets you comfortable with um, creating art in general. But
yeah.
in the beginning, I didn't even really I never really even thought about, well, maybe I need to go to school for this because I felt that I had all of the kind of everything I needed to learn. Like, I can just look this up. I'm going to watch a couple videos on how to do
Mhm.
this because it's funny, but you can go to YouTube and have a real like you can learn so much, like almost everything there is to know about painting. Just go to YouTube. And that's kind of how I just started learning. I just started watching videos. And that's how I found Andrew was on YouTube when he first started his YouTube channel. Um, so I think try like when you go to art school, some art schools are not that way, but I'd say most of them they kind of have a set way in doing things. And there's not a whole lot of room for experimentation and like letting the students kind of do what they want to do. Um, so I think when I times when I did consider it, but it was like, well, they probably like it would I'd start going in this direction, but and I kind of want to start going in that direction. And so I just thought, well, I'm going to learn from certain individuals as much as I can, which is why I think it's always good for artists, yeah, like beginning artists to have a mentor to teach them to have one-on-one teaching, because the thing about, well, like if you have a mentor they'll teach you what they know, but they'll also teach you how to be yourself and
Mhm.
uh, teach you how to be your own artist. I think a lot of art schools they teach you how to do it a certain way and do it that way. And like I said, not all art schools are that way. Just a lot of the ones I've known. So yeah, I never really like I had brief considerations of it, but it was like, I probably don't need to do that. And
Mhm.
I'm kind of happy with like experimenting on my own, working one on one with people. And I think for me, it's worked out much better that way.
Yeah, I think it's pretty rare for a 13-year-old. That's when you got started, right? Around that age.
Roughly around there, yeah.
Roughly that age. To have this consistent drive to search up different painting techniques or do any research on their own, because me, when I was being 13 years old, I was going to children's art school, which helped me to get consistent with it. I got used to making art, but
Mhm.
when I would have been doing it on my own at my home's comfort, I probably would have been too tired after my regular schooling to do any extra art or just like to find this drive to pursue art,
Mhm.
because as a kid I didn't think I was just rather doing what felt fun, or I mean, don't get me wrong, it is a fun thing, right? But I mean,
Mhm.
more fun
Yeah.
things in terms of like playing video games, right? But when
Mhm.
you're being at art school, you can have a better sense of fun, you know?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it gets you comfortable with the environment of working, and
Yeah,
especially when you have other people there, that definitely helps. But I mean, for me, it was more like I kind of just wanted to experiment with these things on my own, um, and not really have a certain like, doing things a certain way. I kind of like the idea of just experimenting my own ideas, seeing what other artists are doing, and then incorporating that into my process. And that's worked really well for me. But I know every artist is much different. So I'd say for a lot of beginner artists, art school is works really well for them. And
yeah.
some they want to do that, they just want to go off and do their own thing. And they just want to like for me, I'm kind of in the middle where it's like I want to like I'm trying to learn as much as I can from all these different individuals, but I also like want to be in my own space and kind of seeing what ideas are going to work and what are not going to work in my own space and kind of learn from those mistakes.
So you had a mentorship with Andrew Tischler, right? And yeah, so my question is, how did you go about the process of getting him to be your mentor?
Well, it wasn't, I'd say, I think I was like 12 and I just sent him a message because at the time he was doing this kind of Skype draw thing where
Mm-hmm.
like certain winners would be able to do a one-on-one Zoom call, or I think at the time it was Skype with him. And I entered and I didn't win, so I just sent him an email wondering if he would be interested in just getting on a video call with me. And he was gracious enough to just say, "Yeah, of course."
Mm.
Um, so that's kind of where it started. He saw that someone that for like 12, 13, and I was as dedicated as I was to my craft. He really wanted to help me with that. So, I would just ask him like, could we get back on Zoom next week? And it just started be like every time we had a Zoom call, I'd ask him a series of questions, show him what I've got going. And we became friends over the years. I don't talk to him as much today, just because he's like the busiest man on the face of the planet. So I don't want to like bother him much right now. But 4 years ago, it's like we were probably talking twice a month. But right now he's got so much going on because he's really growing his business. So he's got all these new things going on right now. So I don't talk, I maybe talk with him once or twice a year now. Um, and I'm kind of looking to, like I'm doing with Van Wetchel, trying to look for artists that I can, work with one on one because it makes a significant difference when you can go into that artist studio and they can point out, give you pointers on your work because they can see it in person and you can get a better idea of how they're
Mm.
doing their pieces because you can see their work in person. So online, you can only do so much. Just it's like when you're showing someone something on a screen, it's going to look very different in person.
Oh yeah.
So, I still watch all of his videos. I still try to keep up with everything he's doing. I watch everything he does on Patreon. I'll play a lot of those videos while I'm painting. Um, so yeah, it was kind of like it wasn't like in the beginning, I just sent him a message and we just started having these monthly conversations. And I saw what he was doing as a professional artist, and that's what I really wanted to do. So I was kind of following a lot of like his method of, a lot of like the YouTube thing, how he painted, kind of what he painted to. Because I think naturally when you're young and you see somebody else and you're looking up to somebody, you kind of want to do what they do. But at some point, like I got to that point where it was like, okay, I got to start doing, me. I got to start painting stuff that only I would paint
Mm-hmm.
and like paint things that I'm inspired by, not just because I'm not painting this just because this person is painting. So Andrew really, he gave me a like the encouragement, and he really helped me just become an artist. Like before that, I was kind of dabbling here, dabbling there, didn't really know what I was doing. And when I saw what he was doing, that's like, okay, that's kind of the artist I want to be. And since then, I mean, a lot has changed. So it's like, kind of my vision of what I wanted to be at, like what an artist was, or kind of the artist I wanted to be when I was 12 is much different now. Uh, but, it's like I see what the online, like he's doing so much online. And I'm not that big of an online kind of guy, but I'm like, I see the possibilities in what you could do with videos, what you could do with YouTube and Patreon. I think okay, there's an opportunity here. So I think I'm going to get back into this. So I still want to be a traditional oil painter who sells their work, but maybe also a video creator as well. So
Mm-hmm.
doing a lot of different things around painting can really help with that, and can help with, if you're doing one thing, at some point you can get burned out, and things slow down. If you have a lot of other things happening around painting, it's usually like every time you do one of those things, it's something new. So, um, yeah, he really helped me get my start. He helped me get my kind of like, he helped me get my career off the ground, I would say. And I'm still learning as much as I can from him today because there's always new stuff to learn. I hope I answered your question.
Oh yeah. I Do you know this artist named Chuck Black?
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's also pretty big on social media and on the internet in general. Um, I also looked up to him a lot, especially when I was starting out, but I never really
Mhm.
thought of reaching out to him or like, why would I? Or thinking that he would have enough time to reply to me or to answer any of my questions, but it's like when someone asks me really comes to me to ask a quick question, I'm more than happy to spend some time to answer to it.
Yeah, well, like, you kind of think like, oh, what are the chances of them actually getting this? Well, they probably won't respond. And it's like, well, you got nothing to lose. You might as well just, send them a message.
Mm-hmm.
And they like worst thing that could happen, they don't reply. But it's like always worth it to reach out to these people. Like I've reached out to a lot of the really big name artists, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them didn't reply, but it was like, well, at least I sent him, I got that out. I sent him a message, and maybe I'll send him another message again. Um, you just kind of keep it consistent. You don't want to bug them about it, but it's like, okay, it's been a few months. They didn't reply to that. Maybe I'll send them another one. But when it comes to artists, like you kind of think like, if anybody sends me a message, asking for help, I'm not gonna think, okay, I'm too busy for that. I'm not gonna reply
Yeah.
to that. Usually you're like, okay, yeah, definitely, I'll reply to that. And I think a lot of artists, a lot of other artists feel the same way about it. So, if you see somebody else, you know, doing what like you really want to do, and you want to reach out to them, it's like, well, then you can just send them a message, see what happens. Like, um, when I reached out to Andrew, he was just starting his YouTube channel. He was just still trying to like get his business together. So, I think it was easier to reach out to him at the time. And I think even now, if you were to reach out to him, he would reply pretty quickly. But like with Van Wetchel, he's represented the same gallery I am. So I just asked the gallery to if he'd be if I could come over to his studio. They sent over his information. I gave him a call. Um, so, reaching out, it's like there's kind of got to get rid of the what if they don't reply kind of a thing, or just
Mm-hmm.
kind of what if in general. And you just send it, like kind of send it with and word it with the intention that they're gonna get it. Um, but maybe like, well, maybe they get it, maybe they don't. It's no big deal. So, I think reaching out to as many uh like to whoever you look up to, reaching out to as many people as possible will help. Like, if you reach out to, 8 people and only 2 of them respond, that's still significant.
You mentioned that your vision has changed a lot through last 5 years. So would you like to tell us what's your current vision like?
Well, I would say, you kind of, I call them just kind of loose goals because a lot of times you say, I'm going to do this, 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 and this
Yeah.
over the next 10 years. And life gets crazy. You have other things coming up, and then sometimes none of that happens, and you have a completely different set path. So, I mean, I'd say right now it's like, I want to kind of achieve the success that a lot of these other artists, like big name artists, like Clyde Aspig, Scott Christensen, Robert Bateman, that kind of like artists who, they can sell a painting or like, I really like what Jeremy Lipking does. And, you go to like, I want to kind of have a vision of like, okay, I want to be in these big museum shows. At some point, I'd like to sell pieces for like 50, $60,000. Um, and you could say though those are goals I have. But the only way I'm going to get there is working hard in the studio. So that's a big drive to like, okay, I want to have pieces that are going to be showing at the Prix de West or Masters of the American West. Shows like that where renowned artists are showing and they've been showing there forever. And it's like, um, in terms of selling my work and where I kind of want my work to hang, those are some bigger goals. And also to be, represented by like, three or four galleries. Like my goal this year is to have a kind of a new set of galleries. Like instead of just one gallery, I got like three or four. But it's like, well, maybe that'll happen, maybe it won't. So I'm still shooting for, big museum shows and being represented by kind of galleries across like where I am, kind of around Colorado. And also, getting more involved on the online side of things, like, getting into Patreon, developing a big following on Patreon, doing more live streams on there, doing YouTube, doing shorter versions of my content on YouTube, being consistent with that. And then maybe I'll do prints. And prints have been kind of a thing where it's like, maybe I'll do them, maybe I won't. We'll kind of see like how Patreon goes, how YouTube goes. Maybe I'll need them, maybe I won't. So you could say they're loose goals. Um, so like the museum shows, I know that that's where I want to be. And there's certain galleries where it's like, okay, my work isn't that good, but I'm gonna push my work to in a few years, I really want it to be that good. So I try not to set like 1,000 different things because then it's hard to focus on all those different things and work towards them. So I only have like a couple big things that I try to work towards because then your focus can be more towards those like two or three things. So I know my work, if it gets better and better, I mean, I think main goal is my work to achieve like just the likeness I'm looking for. Like I know my work like I know what I want it to look like, and it's not there
What do you
yet.
mean by lightness? Like a stronger sense of light?
Oh,
Or.
like likeness,
Oh,
like in terms,
likeness?
yeah. So, if I see certain pieces, like all these different pieces, and I like a way certain artists did, it's like, okay, I'm not there yet, but hopefully, like I could see myself in 2 or 3 years being close to that. And I know, like, when my work, like, it all starts with just working in the studio and doing a really good job. And then all these other things will follow. So, once I've kind of got together a certain amount of work, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go here, talk to this gallery, apply for this show. And you just kind of keep going at it over and over again. And you stay in touch with all these people. And I went to Santa Fe a few weeks ago, talked to all the galleries down there, getting an idea of what sells in certain areas. And so, yeah, I'd say just a couple loose goals is, museum shows, more galleries, creating more video content, and making a solid income just off of Patreon and YouTube. And then I have my original painting business as well. So I kind of have two things that I'm working on simultaneously.
Um, yeah, it sounds really ambitious.
It sounds like to me, it sounds like simple. Like, well, should it? I feel like I should have more than that, but it's like, well, like I said, I don't want to be too set on one path because, I want to be open for change because anything could come up out of the blue, and then these other things maybe are like, okay, now's not a time to do that. I got to focus on this now. Um, so, we all have goals with what we want to do, but, it's like I try not to be like, okay, in 10 years, I'm going to be this. Because probably that's going to change dramatically. And I think sometimes that does work, but, it's like I know what my work needs, what I want it to look like, and I know where I want to go with it.
Yeah, I mean, as we spoke earlier, people in our age change really quickly, develop really quickly, and also to me it has happened a lot where I'm setting a goal for myself and a year later I see the goal, I review the goal again, and it's honestly something I didn't care about at the first place. I'm like,
Yeah,
what a meaningless goal. Things like that happen. So, yeah, these goals keep changing. So,
definitely.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's maybe not so important to fulfill a certain goal, but to at least have them, like
Mhm.
a direction to strive towards. So,
Definitely.
all right. That's maybe a little tough question. Um, so, is there any certain reason for your subject matter? Like, what made you decide to paint landscapes and wildlife? Is there some.
Well, like as opposed to like maybe other topics like portraiture or cityscapes or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
I would say, I mean, it kind of falls into the category of like just starting as an artist. Like I just started doing these things and I was just drawn to them. And like I just started doing it. I'm like, I just enjoyed it. And I thought like, well, what if I do portraiture? And I tried a couple portraits and I wasn't as like involved in the process um, as like me painting, wolves or a mountain lion or something like that. I wasn't as into the process. And, I thought about, well, what if I did like, cityscapes or something like that? And I would dabble in some of these things and experiment to see if I would like them. But, I always came back to wildlife and landscapes. And right now it's predominantly wildlife just because it's like, I like to, what I paint, it's like, I want to kind of give the viewer a glimpse into a lot of what we don't see in nature, like
Mm-hmm.
certain things animals do in a dramatic landscape, because, like, if I'm painting a bear or a mountain lion or bighorn or something like that, uh, there's a lot of more stereotypical images of them or just portraits or something like that. And I try to add like, what if I had this big mountain here with some dramatic lighting and these rocks here and a tree here? And for my design process, Photoshop has helped quite a bit just because I can see more possibilities than I did when I was just sketching it out on paper, which I sometimes still do. But this just makes it so, well, what if I drop this tree in here? How would that work with the composition? So I guess the whole process of painting wildlife in landscape or just a landscape or kind of just a combo of both, I was drawn to it more because I felt that I could be a bit more creative with the process. Like there was a certain way I kind of had to do this. Like, well, if I don't like that tree, I can just get it out, or I can move the mountain here.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of have more fun with the process than like if you paint a portrait, it's pretty simple. It's like, okay, there's a portrait. What color am I going to do the background? That's kind of about like all I saw in that process. And I used to do a lot of portraits because people love to buy portraits and you can crank them out pretty fast. But I just like the idea, like I try to push an idea as far as I can. So like all pretty much all the work I do, I never really refer to one photograph. And I think a lot of our artists hear that a lot. It's like I never refer to just one photo. And I think that is really important because if you are painting from one photo, you're missing out on a lot of the possibilities that a scene like that could present. So it's like, if I just have a little hill of snow, it's like, okay, I'll put some wolves there. I'll put a mountain back
Mm,
here. I'll put some trees here. I'll put some rocks here. And then just from the base of that one photo, I've built an entire scene. So I just feel that in landscape painting, wildlife painting, and a combo of both, there's just a bit more. I feel a bit more involved in the creative process. There's more to do surrounding the painting. You're creating something that has never been done before. You like when you create a unique scene like that, there's probably nothing else that looks like that. So, when it comes to wildlife painting, I'm more drawn to that just because I see there's more possibilities in terms of what you can do with a scene, what you can add, and you learn a lot about composition too, about where to place certain elements. So yeah, I feel that with wildlife and landscape painting that I feel a little bit more involved in the creative process.
you should you should make a Photoshop tutorial of how you create these compositions. It would be pretty
Yeah, I still
interesting.
I still feel like a beginner when it comes to Photoshop. Like when I'm putting a
Mm.
design together, I feel fancy doing it because it's like, okay, you click this, you get this, and then something will come up. It's like, I have no idea how to do this. So I look back at how I was doing it, a year or two ago, and I've definitely improved, just like I have with painting. But, I think, a lot of artists say you got to do it like just with pen and just a pencil and paper. And a lot of like I'd say for a lot of the old school artists, or just if you want to be more old school, that works just as well. I prefer Photoshop and all that just because you can put a design together much faster. And you can kind of get a better idea if a certain color is working or not.
Mm.
Like, you see what Andrew did, and you look at his old videos. He would do little thumbnail sketches, and then he would do kind of a larger sketch, but looser. Then he'll do a final sketch, and then what are they? Kind of like a painting sketch. Drawing a blank on what they're called. And then you'd start the painting. And for me, I found that, I just want to get into the painting process. I want to get into doing the real thing
Yeah.
that I'll take 2 days and just put together this design that I feel a little bit more confident that I know that'll work. So like, Photoshop, I think for a lot of people who don't have any experience with it is daunting. And when I first started out, I was like, this is really daunting. And fortunately, Van Wetchel, like he has a whole background in designing. He's been working with Photoshop for 20 years. So I've been very fortunate to have him teaching me how to use Photoshop. But you can go online and there is so much videos out there to show you how Photoshop works. And I think it really can help with putting a solid design together for more ambitious works.
I have seen Andrew using also a projector to lay down a composition on a canvas in a more recent video.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe not so recent, maybe a year ago or so, but I remember seeing some comments of people being mad at him, basically saying that it kind of destroys the
I
artistic
mean,
element of creating a painting. But
I mean, to like I use whenever I start painting, unless it's really small, but anything that's relatively large, I use a projector just because, I'd rather, if you're gonna draw it up freehand, like a scene like this that I'm gonna be doing, if I was freehanding it, it would take the entire day to draw it out. For me, and it's like, well, if I have a projector, I'm going to get it done. I'm going to get it in much more accurately, and I can draw the whole thing up within about a half an hour. Um, So, there's no right or wrong way of doing these things as an artist. Like people say, oh, you're using a projector, you're cheating. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, this is just my process. This is how I do it. And it's not, I would definitely not consider it cheating. And, it's if you're using your design and, you created the whole thing and just taking that and then projecting it onto what you're going to be doing the larger version of, I see no problem with that. And I've been using a projector for a long time. And,
Mm-hmm.
it helps with the accuracy of the piece. It makes it so you're not drawing and erasing a certain area 10 times before you get it right. And a lot of artists I've talked to, they've been like, yeah, I would not use a projector. Try to just freehand it. And, I think just a projector works best for me. And I definitely don't see it as cheating at all. Now, it may not be good if you take someone else's image and you don't change it at all and you just project it
Yeah.
onto, onto the canvas and you had nothing to do with the creative process, then I would say that I wouldn't do that. But, when you have all your own photos and you put the design together on your own, and if you just project it onto the canvas, I don't see any problem with that. And I think it can really help with making a piece better. But like, when I'm, in another 20 years or so, maybe I won't need the projector. I'll just feel confident enough in what I'm doing just to freehand it, and I can do it very accurately, very quickly. But as for right now, in kind of this learning stage, I think the projector can really help, especially for people who are just starting. Because when you get the drawing out of the way, then that's kind of when the fun starts. Because I think for me, it's like I never really wanted to sit down and be like, okay, I gotta draw this out. This is gonna take a while. And I didn't really want to do it. So using the projector, I can do the whole thing accurately and it doesn't take much time and I can get right into painting. I can get right into the business of just getting oil on canvas instead of fiddling around with the placement of everything. And if you want to do something in the middle, a lot of artists use grids, and a grid can really speed up the process as well. If you have a grid on the picture and then you just transfer that grid to the canvas, that's kind of, I'd say, a good middle ground. You're free handing it, uh, and you're kind of tracing at the same time. So I have used a grid a couple times, and I think I'll probably start using it more in the future. But as for right now, I think a projector works well just for my process right now, and I know probably in a few years that's going to change.
Um, Let me see. I think we have covered pretty much everything I wanted to speak about.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, kind of, I'd say to cap it off, to like anybody who is starting out as a artist, like I said, with those books, I would definitely to anybody who's starting out as an artist but is unsure of it, try to get your hands on those books by Stephen Pressfield. Look him up; all of his books will show up. And I think those will help, a lot of young creatives gain some confidence in what they're doing. And, try not to like you don't want to compare too much, but you also want to you want to look at what other artists are doing and try to see what you can learn from their work instead of just comparing yourself to them, see what you can learn from them. And I think that's much more beneficial. And I think like being an artist, it's I say it's serious play, because you're at the easel every day, and it can be tiring and it can feel like work a lot of the time. But you're also trying to have fun with it, and it's supposed to be you're supposed to have fun with the process. So you want to strike a balance between having fun, but also being serious about what you're doing and approaching it like a professional. You want to be there every day, working at it every day, just striving to get better. And learning as much as you can from other artists. And that's going to take time. You're not going to be it's not like you're going to start and then, a week later you have a masterpiece. So you want to start off small, learning as much as you can and developing it because you got so much time. Like, if you're 21 or something like that, I think a lot of people feel rushed. They got to, get something together. They got to get this career going. They got to be really good at it. And it's like you got so much time to learn. You just, I think having patience and slowing down will get you there just as fast. Like if you're impatient about it, then, the work may not be as good. But if you slow down and are patient with the process and learn as much as you can along the way, I think the results will end up much better. So, I think if you have any doubt in your mind of being an artist, you should just go for it because there's no harm or anything if it doesn't work, now you know. But I would say if you have like a little voice saying that that's what you want to do, you got to go do it. And maybe don't hesitate, just go in and do it and see what happens and kind of be fearless with it.
Yes, I can agree totally. And even the age 21, I think maybe there are even older listeners who have this ambition to become an artist, and seeing how far have you got in about 6 years or so. It's
Yeah, I mean, it's about that, but it's like it feels like it's been so much longer than that. Like
yeah.
thinking years ago, it's like, wow, I was just starting that long ago, and now I am where I am now. So that's kind of what I was saying before. It's like if you're really ambitious about it when you're young, things can happen pretty quickly. Um, and even right now, I'm like this year, I have goals to do all kinds of new things this year. So yeah, like even if you're like, if you just retired, if you're 65 or something like that, and you're kind of thinking about it, well, just go into it, do it, and see what happens. Because it doesn't matter like how young or old you are. There's never a wrong time or best time. There's always a good time to start. And if you feel that like, well, maybe should I do it? Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. If that's kind of going in your head, just do it
Mhm.
because if you don't do it, you'll probably regret it. You just got to go into it all in and see what happens.
Yeah, it's way better to live with a thought that, hey, at least I tried, in case it didn't work out, than to live with a thought that, hey, maybe in another life.
Yeah, and if you feel that's really what you want to do, I wouldn't say like, well, it didn't work out. Oh well. But I don't really look at it that way. It's more
Yeah.
like if you're gonna go all in, for me, it's like if you're gonna go in, go all in and try to make it like push as hard as you can to make it a success. And that's kind of been my philosophy behind it. And I've had times where it's like, well, maybe I should do this on the side, um, to just have more income. And, Andrew was telling me this a while ago where it's like, it's either like, if you're going to be committed to this, to what you're doing now, you got to be fully committed. And once you kind of get that in your head, like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, like that's kind of where the motivation comes from. It's like, okay, I'm going to be a professional artist. And that's once you get that in your mind, that's just how you approach everything. So, and you get more ambitious with what you're doing. Um, and you kind of start getting the what ifs out of the way and you just do
Mhm.
it without really any hesitation. And if it does, like, if you do something along the way and it doesn't work out, well, now I know how not to do it. So I'm just going to do it again. Um, so I think I mentioned that before. So if you think maybe you should be an artist, just do it anyway. Don't hesitate. Um, like I can see you that like, I think you're all in on the process. And been doing it for quite a few years now. So I think if you've been doing painting for years and you can see constant growth, I think that's when you know you're on the right track. Is like you've been painting for 5 or 10 years and you can see very consistent growth and things are happening. It's like, okay, I'm on the right path.
Do you mean in terms of doing art or in terms of choosing a profession?
Well, I would say both. Like you can
Mm.
see how much things have changed and how much growth there is as like in terms of just the art you're creating and also how your mindset towards what you're doing. Like you may have been a little unsure about it in the beginning, but then you gain confidence in what you do. You just start, once you start going at these things that maybe are a little ambitious, you gain confidence. And then every time you do them over and over, and then, if something comes up that just didn't work, you're like, well, oh well, I'll just do it again. That's why it's like a lot of people think it's kind of crazy. Like if I spend 2 weeks on a painting and then decide it doesn't work and I'm going to do it again, that sounds like kind of crazy, but for me, I've kind of gained enough confidence where it's like, well, I know it's going to be a lot better if I do it again. So I look at the bigger picture instead of just focusing on like how I feel about it right then and like how I feel about, well, God, it really sucks that I'm stopping on this whole piece and I got to start over. It's like, well, if I do start over and I get back to this point, I'm going to be very glad I did start over. So it may
Oh
not feel
yeah,
good in that moment, but once you actually get there, you're gonna be really glad you did it.
but yeah, let's wrap this up. Thank you for taking your time and answering my questions and all other questions that people might have had.
Of course.
If someone listening has any other questions or they would like to get to know you more and your work, where can they find you?
Well, I have my website. It's just CodyOldham.com. That's where you can see just more. You can see all my wildlife landscape pieces there. And you can also see my YouTube videos on my website, or you could just go to my YouTube channel. I think that's just Cody Oldham artist. And you can also find me on Instagram, Cody Oldham artist. That's kind of where um, like anything new that's happening in the studio, I post about. So I post some behind the scenes stuff, new things that are happening. And I also post about the new pieces that I just did. So yeah, Instagram, YouTube, and my website, Cody Oldham Artist and CodyOldham.com.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If there is a specific artist that you will love to hear in this podcast, let me know. Also, I don't have a name for this podcast yet, so you can think one instead of me and also let me know.